it can be one of the most exciting times in your life. You feel you found your purpose or your calling, and you're embarking on a new adventure to impact this crazy planet we live on. And then it happens. Everything falls apart. And you don't know why when you were just trying to do something good. My guest today says this is all part of the process of following God. And she's here to tell us why. Okay, Lina, this is not good news. You're trying to do something good.
It's a hard pill to swallow.
You think that God would reward you, like maybe give you a BMW or at least lots of money to do the work.
Right,
So
or a few Facebook likes or something.
Right?
Yeah.
So why do you say this is part of our process?
You don't want it to be. I wish it could be that way, but I wrote Stripped, the book where I talk about this, after going through a very difficult time. And it came as a surprise because I had surrendered everything to Jesus, and I really did. I felt like I've done my part now, like, God, you're going to do yours. Like, this is the whole point of it. And it wasn't turning out that way. And I'm a slow learner, so it took me like literally years to finally kind of get on the same page as the Lord and be like, there's actually purpose here. And it was really going into his word and seeing like there's not one person who was greatly used by God who wasn't completely stripped and broken. And I think, in fact, the word came to me when I was reading in Genesis about the story of Joseph and how he was stripped of his coat, his own brothers put him in a pit and
so just
sold
so people
to a
not
slave.
knowing that story, it was basically someone who had a dream of God said he was going to rule, right? And then what happens?
He thought he was going to be this great, have a life for God, change the world. And so he's got 11 brothers who hate him because, his father loves him and had given him this quote. And so he goes to basically, he's doing the right thing. He's walking blamelessly. He's where he needs to be. And his dad gives him a small errand to run and he doesn't fight it. He shows up and his brothers basically gang up on him, dump him in a pit, take his coat, sell him as a slave to the Egyptians, which was like the enemy, like another land. Imagine being sold to an Afghani, drifter, and basically tell the dad that an animal ate him, put blood, actually acted it out so much that they put blood on his coat. And so he was stripped when he thought that he was being obedient and honoring God and doing what he was supposed to be doing. And of course, the beautiful story of Joseph, and many of you might not maybe know this story from the Bible, but the Broadway show, the Joseph and the Amazing Coat of Multicolours.
Technicolor coat, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
And basically, of course, the story is he goes from that pit to another pit. Like, it's not bad enough that you're sold into slavery, but then, you sort of rise and try to make a life out of this misery. And then it happens again. He's wrongly accused of rape. He never did it, and he gets put in prison. And of course, then the most awesome part of the story of Joseph is he has an opportunity to minister to two men in jail that he thinks are going to bring him freedom, and they forget about him. And so now 2 more years pass,
right?
And Joseph's still stuck in that prison. But now, fast forward 13, 14 years, whatever it is, and Pharaoh has a dream. And one man is gifted to interpret dreams because God had gifted him and called him for that one thing. And Pharaoh's like, no one can interpret my dream. Who's there? And now one of those, the butler remembers, there's this guy in prison. And they bring Joseph, and he goes from the prison to the right hand of Pharaoh. And to me,
becomes the second most powerful man in the land in one day.
Yeah, and literally one day they get up, they shower him up, put his makeup on, and he's ready to go.
Makeup on,
and I mean, it's crazy because you just read it and you go, wow. And yet that same God who did that same story is doing that story in every one of us today.
This is what I always say is like, you can always count on God to come through for you, but the problem with God is that he likes a good story. It's like,
it's so true,
right?
It's like he just makes you wait. Yeah. But,
I know.
But isn't that what that's what we pay money to go to the box office to see. We don't want a story like, he grew up, married, lived happily ever after, and then what? And like, versus a story where you feel the tension of what's happening, you see the lessons and the person. And Joseph, in his, to see what happened to him in that season of stripping, instead of becoming bitter, instead of becoming proud, what he does is really he learns to forgive, he learns to depend on God, and his heart is never in a bad place. Like somehow God is so strongly loving in his life that he is able to see past the hurt, really this is the story of, it's funny, I don't even think I talk about Joseph in this book, but he's such a good symbol, but one among many. I think the people that I use in the book really are the people of Israel, who very much the same, but what I love about the people of Israel is they're a lot more like us. So Joseph is like this perfect guy who everything goes well with, whereas the people of Israel are like me. they complained, they moaned, they groaned, they never learned a lesson. He saves them with the plagues. And then they face the Red Sea, and they're like, how are we going to get through the Red Sea? And then God saves them. They're like, rah, rah, God. And then, 3 verses later, they're like, man, I'm so hungry. I'm so thirsty. And that's me, mumbling, complaining, wondering, God, why have you left me? This didn't turn out like I thought. Take us back to Egypt. The food was so good. And yet God steadfastly staying with them. That's awesome. I can't even get over that. And so I find encouragement there.
This is all about like character stuff, right? Because if you don't have some of that stuff in your life and you get maybe the platform or wherever you want to be, you're going to be destructive in a sense, right?
No
You're
doubt.
going to hurt people.
And we're in such a unique time in history because we are able to see what everybody's doing all the time. And so there's many, I teach at a lot of colleges, I do chapels and things like that, and I see a lot of millennials, and they're known millennials that they want to change the world, and it's a great thing, but I think they get on social media and they see these people who are changing the world who have lived through 30 years of stripping, basically, doing, learning the lessons, being ground out by God, and they think, well, this is, if you're living for God, I ought to have that result, rather than seeing the process. And really this book is to encourage that person who feels God's call in their life, like I did back in my late 20s, giving everything to the Lord, thinking even, man, this is why God has allowed my own personal relationship hurt. I broke an engagement, was single, blah, 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 because God wanted to do this great ministry work in me, and then hitting this wall of saying, well, I've given God my all, and now what? And yet that's where I started growing.
Yeah, you broke off your engagement, so you're grieving that, and then you give everything to God to go into ministry, women's ministry, and then He moves you somewhere.
It was so random too. I was
no
a doctor, and how would I feel called to women's ministry? But really, it was teaching the Bible. That was what I, you ever do something, this is my calling. That was what happened to me. It was that circumstance that led to that. And yeah, and I thought I would stay in that church. The class I was teaching was growing. There's so much energy. The church was behind me. I mean, it was really a very good place, very healthy place, but there were no jobs from what I was doing, and God literally propels me to Chicago, where I knew no one except my sister, but certainly no one in the church world, and I started going through my own personal. I failed in a big professional test that I had to take. That was a huge, like at the time. Now I look back and think, who cares? I mean, I took it again and passed, and I have so much to minister to others, and I'm so confident in who I am as a doctor. Like, these things don't matter, but when they happen to you, you think your whole world is going to end.
Yes, you do.
But my pride was being stripped, and my self-dependence was being stripped, and God was showing me my expectations were from the results, and that's a lesson I keep learning. Expectations are not from Him, but from what I want Him to give me, and that whole tension is a constant dance and a constant stripping.
There's so much more we could talk about. I just want to sit here and chat with you all day. You are such an encouragement. Such a cool girl.
Why don't we climb Mount Kilimanjaro together?
I would love
we can
that,
talk
right?
for hours.
I've done that one, but I want to do Machu Picchu. So what about that?
I'm in. Let's
okay,
do it.
let's do it.
Then we can do a show and talk about it.
Right?
I know.
Love it. I love it.
We
We're gonna
love
climb
it.
mountains. I know,
With you.
right? Well, you know what? I hope you're encouraged today. I am. I'm just totally overwhelmed by what you had to say, and that whole idea of just, and I've seen it in my own life, things that God whispered over my life and in my ear 20 years ago, and it seemed like there was no way it would happen. God is doing it even in this day, and there's still more to come. You have to trust Him to write your story, and don't be impatient with Him, because He's doing a good work in you. Right about the moment you figure out you don't know what you're doing and you don't have what it takes, that's about the moment He's going to use you. We'll be right back.